Well, hello friends, welcome back to my channel. In this video, what I'm going to be talking about is chapter 2, and this is the playlist series of my near-death event and what happened in my life afterwards. So in chapter 2, I want to talk about the refiner's fire for a little bit before I get into what happened when I came home. So the refiner's fire refers to a scripture that talks about God is the refiner, and we are the treasure that God seeks. And just like any gold or silver, when it comes out of the mountains, it's has a lot of impurities, and so that gold or that silver is put into a fire to melt the impurities away, so then you have the treasure. So we are like God's treasure, and He wants to melt the impurities out of our life. So I want to talk about the heat of adversity for a minute. And in this video, what I'm going to be talking about is several events that happened when I got home where I felt like I was in the heat of the fire. Not in the flame, but in the heat to burn away the impurities. So I'm going to take a little pause for this commercial break, and when I get back, we're going to start right into this video. This video is sponsored by Heart to Heart Refinement Online School at heart-to-heart-refinement-school-teachable.com. This is stage 2, or the second course of our online school. This is how to prepare your heart to following Jesus. Learn to transform your heart to grow in your faith. Again, we want to focus on the table of contents, and we're going to have an acknowledgement. We're going to have a book review. Then you're going to see the preface, and then we're going to have an introduction to the course. In session 1, we're going to get acquainted to preparing our heart. In session 2, we're going to answer the call to following Jesus. In session 3, who is Jesus? In session 4, we're going to create our testimony. In session 5, we're going to make God a priority in our life. In session 6 is what life is like as a new disciple. In session 7, we need to learn to be patient with ourselves. In session 8, learn to study the Bible. And in session 9, we're going to make some time for Jesus. And session 10, learn to understand the fruits of the Spirit. My friends, this is an amazing book, and we're going to learn this in this online course that's linked below. Also, how to order this book is also linked in the descriptions below. Well, my friends, as you can see in this little section of this video, I'm actually standing up. And I do have a level camera, and I have a level trim piece on my mural back here. But it shows a little bit unlevel in my video. Hopefully that won't be such a distraction. But I'm standing up for a reason. So in the last video that I shared, which was chapter 1, I told you that I left the hospital and I was walking with the walker, as you can see right here. You know, it's a big walker, and it had those little wheels on her so I could roll along and walk. Well, I had to have a bottle of oxygen with me, and I had to have that on all the time. And the problem is that the jerking activity was a result of me not breathing. In order to keep my breathing going, I had to have an oxygen bottle on that delivered oxygen at 2 liters per minute. So I actually have one of the oxygen bottles, and this accident, like I said, happened 18 years ago. But I want to show you the size of the bottle that they asked me to carry. And so when I got this, they gave me a little black bag to put it in. And this thing is pretty heavy, as you can tell. Let me see if I can put my 1-inch level next to it, or 1 foot level. So you know, this thing is almost 2 foot or 18 inches big. So I had to deal with this and walk with the walker at the same time. Well, when I started walking with that walker, what would happen is my legs would lock up, and I would stumble and fall. Remember, for 5 months, my friends, I was paralyzed. I couldn't feel my legs. And when they started to come back, they were like a robot kind of walking. They were stiff-legged. And after a while, the walking, it's actually called a gait dysfunction. That's what they called it. So I needed to build something where I could carry this oxygen bottle on my back, okay? So what I did after I got home, and I'm going to talk to you about what happened when I got home, but I want to talk to you about this stuff first, because I had to endure all of this, and walking with this oxygen bottle and trying to maneuver that walker was a little hard. So what I did, my friends, is I took the bottle to a leather maker, and we came up with a bag. Okay, this is a backpack. And so anyway, my friends, there is an air tank inside this bag. Let me open this up for you here so you can see. And so anyway, you put the air tank down there. It's got the gauge on it and everything, and the oxygen tube is passed down through a track on this bag, and I'm going to show you this here in a minute. So let me close this pouch back. And at the time, my friends, I was trying to get a horse ranch, and I was battling with the railroad with the legal case. And so we came up with this backpack, and I don't know if you can see this in the camera or not, but this has a brand on it. It's One Heart. So the name of the ranch that I built was actually the One Heart Ranch, but it's the heart that I want to highlight on. And so here's all the oxygen hose, and I still got this today because I'm still legally severely disabled. But by the grace of God, I overcome this. So we have the ability to put this backpack on. And like I said, this is almost a 2-foot tall bottle. So when I put this on, it's quite an adventure to put this bag on. So now, as you can see, I can put this on, and there's a little strap here that connects the two front pieces and the oxygen. And now, as you can see, I can put the oxygen on. My friends, is this not strapped to the heat of adversity? So I could have hands free so I can maneuver the walker a little bit better. So there's the backpack on my back, okay? A lot of us, when we get older, I'm 55 years old, okay? And 18 years ago is when this accident happened. This was a very severe accident. And a lot of the older people today, or might be watching my videos, I understand what it's like to have to be on oxygen. I understand what it's like to get older, okay? This oxygen also probably represents cancer. It represents sickness, right? Those things that put us into the fire of adversity, which are the struggles and the trials and the storms of our life. That's the adversity that we live with every single day of our life. But God puts us through those trials. Sometimes they're not of His doing. Sometimes that's the way life is. And so we have to understand what the fire of adversity means. Okay? Honestly, friends, I don't like wearing all this gear. I don't like being in the fire. And when I put this on, I feel like it's an overburden to me. All right? But not as bad as what happened after I returned from the hospital. I'm going to change the angle of the camera, and we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about that. My friends, if you think that your life is tough and you think that you've been through the fire, stay tuned. Let's give it a listen. And my friends, one thing I want to talk about is the heat of adversity. So the heat of adversity happens when we're in that emotional fire. So remember the refiner's fire that I opened this video talking about? It's the heat that God puts us in that furnace to get the impurities to burn away, so the treasure or the gold or the silver can shine brighter. So I just talked to you about the oxygen bag that I had to carry, and then the walker that I was walking with, and then the bag that I made. And that helped a lot to be able to endure that. So I'm going to share a few things of what was going on prior to the near-death event that happened on October 18th of 2002. And I was working for the railroad, and I was a conductor engineer. But what was going on at home in my personal life is what I want to talk to you about. I was in a new marriage. So the train accident itself actually happened on July 9th of 2002. Well, in June of 2001, I got married to a new wife. So now what we were doing is I was running trains, and I would be gone for 2 or 3 days, and I'd come home, and I'd be home for a couple of days, and then sometimes I would turn and burn depending on which line of the railroad I was working on. If I wanted to lay off for a round trip, I might be home for 4 days, but very seldom did I do that. So most of the time I was home for maybe 24 to 36 hours, and I'd be called to go to work again. So I was in a new marriage, and I had stepchildren, and things with the stepchildren being teenagers, it was a difficult time. So what I was doing when I was home was I was, working in the yard, and I had a hot tub, and so I was building an enclosure for the hot tub to go in, and a deck that would come out my back door and come up to it. And I was working on building a fence, and just things that was making my property better, And so after I got out of the hospital, so October 18th is when the near-death event happened. And I got out of the hospital about the 21st of March of 2003. So you know that there's about 5, almost 6 months that went through there, okay? So I needed to build that pouch in order to put my nail apron on and be able to have hands free, but I had to have the walker there too, and so it was difficult. So as you remember in chapter 1, my friends, I had problems with breathing. I had to have the oxygen to breathe, and I had problems with my walking. So my balance was really, really messed up. And so I had problems with my walking, and I also had problems with memory, speech, and you were hearing a little bit of that now. And I have just a few basic notes here again, but I don't have something wrote out. And a lot of my videos in the past, that I was reading from an article, or I was reading from a book or something like that. But this disability doesn't allow me to do that. So I follow along on a few points and try to remember what I need to work on. So when I'm editing this video, I will edit out some of my pauses and trying to keep my mind collected. But I think you need to hear some of those things, because my friends, we think that we have life hard, okay? And we reach out and we try to find somebody that will help us, that will understand what we're going through. And the only way that somebody can do that, my friends, is to give you an example of what's going on in their life and how they got through that. So the heat of adversity is going into the heat of the fire to have these impurities removed, okay? So I have walking problems, I have breathing problems, I have speech problems, I have cognitive dysfunction issues, I have short-term memory issues, I have focus, alertness, concentration issues. And then I had judgment, reasoning, and comprehension. Maybe I said some of those wrong. But comprehension, judgment, reasoning, concentration, focus, and alertness. Yeah, that was it. It's intense. It's intense. And sometimes I would say things that I didn't really think through because my mind was working, but my brainstem wasn't working. So somehow the signals got mixed inside my mind. So I was trying to deal with all that. And I was in a new marriage, and that's a lot to put on a new wife. An awful lot to put on a new wife. And so she became really distant to me, almost to the point that she didn't want to live with me no more. And so what I'm going to do, my friends, is I'm going to tell you what happened the night that she asked me to move out. And part of the disability was the head trauma, you know. And so I had a collapsed eardrum that happened in an accident when I was like 25 or 30 years old. But I didn't know that it was causing a complication with my hearing, and the sounds that would come in, especially music or drums or whatever, they were compounding in there. And then loud noises would set me off. Almost to the point of being irritated. And my biggest concern and my biggest problem back then is I had trouble sleeping, because the jerking activity that I had, the monoclonic jerking, would come on when I try to go to bed or when I try to sleep. And so I would jerk violently, uncontrolled, violently, several times just to be able to rest. And it was intense, and I wasn't able to sleep. And so I'd stay awake, and then finally I would get to a point that I had to take over-the-counter sleep aids to help. And the doctors, I've seen so many doctors, physical therapists, speech therapists, gait training therapists, mental health therapists, just everybody trying to help me. But at the same time, I'm trying to work with all this adversity in my life, and my wife is trying to deal with it too. Her best response was to detach from me and become distant. Well, this night that happened was, well, let me back up a little bit. When I got home, the doctors gave us, my wife and I, a 2 to 6 month life expectancy on my life. And within 2 to 6 months, the doctors thought I was going to die. So what had happened is that I had a daughter from a previous relationship. And so my mom, knowing all this, she reaches out to my daughter's mom. And my daughter's mom says, you need to spend some time with your daughter. So I was living in a hostile environment, in a relationship where my wife at the time didn't want me to be there. The stepchildren were completely out of hand, and this is summer break, and so the teenagers are home, and I'd normally be out working or I'd be outside, and I wasn't dealing with it. But I was so sick from this disability, from this injury, that I didn't know what to do, and the lack of sleep and everything. And the stepson, he was playing music really loud, and just the opposite side of the hallway where my bedroom was at. And every time he would play his music, I'd keep hearing this bam, 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 bam. Yeah, I shook the camera there. But that's what it felt like, coming through the wall of a bedroom, and I kept hearing that. And it just grated on my nerves. The lack of sleep, a shattered eardrum where the noise was bouncing through. And I was laying in bed all day long. I just was miserable. And talk about the heat of adversity, you know, those things that I have no control over. And sometimes, my friends, things happen that we have no control over. We could lose a loved one. We could get diagnosed with cancer. We ourselves, you guys, could get into a car accident, just like I was in a train accident. But what do you do? What do you do? So, and speaking of hospitals, I still got the hospital cup that I had when I was in the hospital. So my wife comes home from work that night, and I'm laying in bed, and she was just thinking that her home was becoming a hospital, and also a psych ward, because she was teetering on this diagnosis of a conversion disorder. So a conversion disorder is emotional problems manifesting into physical symptoms. Well, I didn't have a conversion disorder. I had a brainstem cerebellum injury that the new neurologist diagnosed me with, and then put a 2 to 6 month life expectancy on me because of the damage. So she comes home, and she asked me what was wrong, and so I reached over and I tapped that wall. This is what I've been hearing all day long. Instead of going in and asking her son to turn the music down, she had a little silky terrier dog that had a broken leg. The dog had a broken leg because the stepson had kicked the dog and broke his leg. So she takes that dog when I hit the wall and throws that dog at me. She was at the foot of my bed. I was laying down and that dog bounced off of my forehead. That was intense, my friends. And I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad towards her or about her, but to allow you to understand the environment of what I went into, either caused by me or caused by the situation I had no control over. So after she threw the dog at me, she says, "You need to get out of here and go for a drive or something." And after she threw the dog at me and told me to go for a drive, I took it upon myself to leave, and I went and checked into a motel room. But I still had my daughter to have to take care of. So my daughter was at a carnival with my stepdaughter at that time. And so I went and back to the house after I got the motel room and told my wife at the time that I needed to find my daughter, to take my daughter with me. And she told me, she says, "You just go where you're going and I'll bring your daughter wherever you're at in the morning when she gets back." Wow, wow. So I said, okay, and I didn't want a divorce. I wanted to heal from my injuries. So I moved out, and my daughter and I, we went to that motel room, and the wife at the time, she brought my daughter to the motel room, and we met for an ice cream cone. And I told my wife I did not want a divorce. I just needed to heal. I needed to get better. And I couldn't do it in the environment of the house I was living in. And so it was a good thing that I moved out. But my wife became very distant. She wouldn't let me go over to the house. She wouldn't let me call her at the house. The only time I could call her was at work where she worked at. I couldn't even call her on her cell phone. It got that bad. These were the orders and the instructions that she gave me. And about once every 2 weeks, she'd stop over at the apartment where I was at to visit with me. My friends, what was happening is my wife was having an affair. She went back to the ex-boyfriend she was with. So as this story escalates, my friends, it gets a lot worse. It gets a lot worse. And so I'm struggling and I'm trying. And then my daughter, she gets to the point that it's time for her to go back to school. And she lives up in Oregon. And at this time I lived in Nebraska. And so she needed to go home. So now, my friends, I'm going to talk to you about my 7th near-death event. I'm dealing with different drugs that the doctors are giving me. I'm trying to figure out how to sleep. I'm not getting the proper sleep that I'm getting. I can't process the speed of traffic when I'm driving. My eyes are bouncing, going like this. It was intense. And the lack of sleep was really, really getting to me. And so the day that my daughter was packing to go home, her mom came to get her. And her brother was there. And my mom was en route to come and sit with me because they knew, 2 to 6 month period. And this was in August. So I got home in March. My daughter came in the first part of June, had to go home the end of August. So we got March, April, May, June, July, August. I'm reaching 5 months of the 6-month life expectancy from the doctors. So about the time that my daughter was carrying her last bag out the door, I wanted to stand up and give my daughter a hug and a kiss goodbye. And when I stood up, I collapsed. Just like that, fell flat on the floor in my apartment. And I think I fell on my stomach or something. I can't remember. It's just so vague. And I think that my daughter ran to my side and she was screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And at that time, my daughter was 13 years old. It was severe for her too, And so her mom, which was my ex, she knelt down at my side and must have rolled me over or something, because I remember looking up at her, and she kept telling me, you need to stay with us. Your daughter still needs you. You need to stay with us. And then about 5 minutes later, it seems like my mom was there, and she was kneeling down next to me, and I was gone. I had died again, and just right on the verge of death. And my mom would talk to me, and then I'd start talking to her again. And I just told my mom, I just want to go home. I just want to go back to heaven, because this life that I was living after this accident wasn't what I needed. And I didn't want to go to the emergency room. I just wanted to die. I just wanted to go back to heaven and go through that gate that I seen open, because I couldn't live with the fact, how am I supposed to help people when I can't even help myself? That was intense, my friends. And not too much time later, I hear the sirens and the EMTs come. And my mom says, he stopped breathing many, 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 many times. And my mom says he had this problem back in October of last year. And they took my vitals, and my oxygen was really low. It was like 38. And my blood pressure was really, really low. I mean, when your blood pressure and your heart rate and your oxygen saturation is really low, you're pretty much gone, or pretty close to it. So that was my 7th near-death event. And they took me back to the hospital again. It got me stabilized. And that's when a new neurologist out of Scottsbluff, Nebraska, came into the emergency room where I was at. And his name is Dr. Terry Himes. And I've had his permission to share his name on here, and I'm going to share a picture of him right there. He's a very good neurologist, and it didn't take very long where he started helping me with the proper medications. So my friends, I'm going to leave this video with that. It's almost 20 minutes into it now. My friends, the heat of adversity is hot. It's really hot. When you have all these problems going on in your life and you can't get out of them, God's going to put you into a fire. And sometimes we don't recognize that fire, my friends. So that's the heat of adversity. So chapter 3 coming up, my friends, we're going to talk about how God began to mold me. So there are 4 areas in the refiner's fire: going into the heat, being molded, being filled and equipped, and being used by God. So next Sunday's video, my friends, we're going to talk about the molding stages of my life after my near-death event. My friends, I do a midweek Bible study on my YouTube channel. So if you would like to tune in on my Bible study, I'm actually doing the great commands of Jesus Christ that he instructed to his disciples to go out and to teach to all the nations. If you would check that video out, that would be pretty cool. And like I said, I do that every Wednesday night. My friends, I'll be back next Sunday morning with chapter 3, and we're going to talk about what happened after I got out of the emergency room after my 7th near-death event. May God bless you. May his face shine upon you, and may Jesus always bring you joy. I'll see you in the next video.